Okay, here we go. And I'm going to screen share and then we'll start from there. Please keep typing in the comments. I will get to it. So just let me know. Do you see my screen? Perfect. Thanks, Dee. And now I'm going to go through what I did last week. Okay, no, this week we're better. I go straight to slides. Like I know exactly where the slideshow is. Okay, so I thought this was a really important masterclass. And as I was reading the book, not to blow my own horn, I was like, oh my God, this is actually very well researched, some of the things that I wanted to talk about. So today's title is called The Legacy of Oppression, Rewriting Family Money Stories and Healing Parental Wounds. So I thought it would be really, really cool to look at the link between how oppression impacts the nervous system at a trauma level, and then also from there, how it impacts our ability to form relationships within our families, right? So either as people of color or as women or as both, or people who have different sexual orientations, like we're LGBTQ, how does all of that, like all these various forms of oppression and systemic oppression impact us? And how does it then impact the way that we show up in families? And how does it change family dynamics? So that was something that I really had a lot of fun. Well, I won't say fun because researching it was like really not as fun, the research part. But when I was putting it together, I was like, oh my God, I can see why our families operate like this. I can see why mothers and daughters are at odds so often, right? If you have a deep mother wound, then you understand it. If you've got a deep father wound, then you understand it, because most of the times we don't even realize how being in this body impacts us and impacts the amount of money that we make, right? So if you've just joined, my name is Vangile. I help mainly women of color heal generational money patterns so they can unlock new levels of success and build generational wealth. So today's focus is on what's your money personality. So this is my latest book after Heart, Mind, and Money and the Womb and Money Journal, right? So we'll be focusing on chapter 4 to chapter 6, right? So we'll be looking at how does oppression impact us as people? How does it impact our financial behavior? So I've done lots and lots of studies in this book. This book has loads of research, guys, where like I look at studies that have been done on the nervous system as a result of oppression, and understanding our mother wound, our father wound, how that impacts us, and then how all these things start to impact our money archetypes. So last week we looked at the intro chapter, and then we looked at chapter 1 all the way through to chapter 3. Okay, so for this particular class, we're going to end with defining archetypes. When I did this, I was literally just like all over the place when these were just my themes. But basically, the first thing that we want to do is define our money archetypes, define what archetypes are. We'll end with that. And then I'll explain what money archetypes are. But we are going to start with number 3 and number 4. Incidentally, we're going to be looking at family patterns in Black families. We're going to examine specific family patterns and how they impact our financial behaviors. And yes, I've been told by many people that this is not specific to Black families, so I am very, very much aware of that. I know that there are people from all walks of life in different countries on this webinar, right, and on this masterclass. So we're going to look at systemic oppression and how it impacts us as well, right? So we're going to look at how it impacts our ability to make money. So Making money, and I think that's very, very important. I will touch on that more in depth later, but I'm a big believer that the way that women make money because of the systemic issues has got to be very, very different to how men make money, especially as entrepreneurs. Most women in South Africa, like in the book, I share that like over 40% of households are single mother households. So the way that we make money, if you are a woman and you're a single mother, has got to take into account your circumstances compared to when men give us financial advice. Men can tell you wake up at 5 a.m., they wake up at 5 a.m., they jog, they go out and read for a certain amount of time, they meditate, all those things. But for most single mothers, if you're getting that advice, it is not exactly helpful to your situation, and it's not taking into account a lot of systemic issues, right? So this is why when we talk about money, I'm a big believer that when we talk about money, we need to look at money trauma. We have to look at our own situations, right? Our own unique family dynamics and where we are in the present moment so that we can actually get advice that is in alignment with us, and we can start to build companies and build investment portfolios that are in alignment with us. Because how someone who is single, and I'm seeing this completely in my life, right? When I was single, how I was building my business was so different, right? And now I'm trying to figure out, where do I fit into this world of marriage and all those things? Because it's so, so different, because the responsibilities and some of the ways that I spend my days is changing, right? So how do I continue to build a business with that? And that's such a small thing, right? Now imagine if you throw kids into the mix, right? Now imagine if you throw aging parents that move in with you. That completely changes. And yet, how we've often been taught about personal finance has been from a very white male and very Western perspective, right? So it doesn't always take into account all these nuances, which I think is so, so important. And for us to also understand how all these things impact us and why some days we feel too tired to cope, why we have self-esteem issues, so that we can address that and know exactly where to start. So I'm going to start by reading from page 80 of the book, right? Just to get us started, and then I'm going to launch into an icebreaker exercise. And I think this is going to be kind of cool because it will tell you exactly where I'm coming from. So instead of just telling you about my family dynamics, I'm just going to read from it. I'm just going to read a little bit about that and then discuss it, right? And it will lead into the icebreaker exercise. So I write in page 18, my mother had been the breadwinner in her family, the sibling who ended up being her mother's sidekick, mothering her siblings, and she felt resented by everyone. This resentment generally leads to a very tense relationship between siblings, because the responsible sibling is not just a sibling, but also a deputy parent, right? But also a deputy mother. Female breadwinners may also not have the best relationships with their mothers, or they may have overly codependent relationships with them. The deputy parent child is often a firstborn, the fixer or sweet one, but not always. They watch their mother struggle with the parenting role and out of love decide that they don't want their mother to go through this alone and step in to share the emotional load, right? So for me, that's where I started to also understand how family dynamics play a huge role in building generational wealth. As a young teenager, what I saw was how my mother was looking after everybody in the family, and then how my uncle was looking after everybody in the family, to the point where my mother had to often prioritize paying for our schooling in order to pay for my cousin's schooling, right? She'd be paying for their university and then be compromising with paying for our schooling. And then my dad had to step in. And I realized only later in my 20s how that impacts generational wealth, right? But how that is also deeply tied to South Africa's history of apartheid, right? How apartheid literally created a certain dynamic within South Africa where black tax where literally eventually black tax has become the norm for us because we were so many of our parents and their parents, our grandparents and great grandparents were denied access to education and were given subpar education as Bantu education, which is termed Bantu education for anyone that is on this call, right? And is not South African. So it was termed Bantu education, and it was literally created to be subpar, which meant that you couldn't progress at the same rate. So at the same rate as, say, your white counterparts. So the ones that could progress at the same rate and weren't on the one side fighting for freedom, because you had family members on the one side, children who are supposed to be at school being children are fighting for freedom and fighting for fighting the apartheid police. On the other side, you've got others trying to go to school, and then they have to help out parents that are being blocked from earning more because it's within the system that they cannot earn at the same rate. They cannot earn the same salaries as anyone else that is as as colored or colored being biracial if you're not South African, right? Or Indian or white. And when I say colored being biracial, that is a very it's such a watered down version. So I apologize because it's so much more complicated than that. And most South Africans know that it is, right? But for the sake of this class, I'm just going to keep it simple and say that even though our history is way more complex, right? But because of such situations, you then had a system where more and more young kids had to step in to help their mothers or their fathers, because often the fathers were out in Joburg because of the migratory system that was created, looking for better jobs, or they were in exile fighting for freedom. So you ended up with a single mother household often, right? Or people were completely displaced through forced removals. So my maternal family was not exactly unique, right? But what did happen was that the strain of having one or two people looking after everybody else in the family and the trauma that comes as a result of oppression and trying and failing and trying and failing, and eventually people just giving up and not even bothering to try to earn more or to dream bigger because they know that the system will deny their progress, ended up causing a real issue and a real rift within my family, to the point where today my mom's family is only now starting to come together again. When I was writing this book, they weren't even talking. They weren't on talking terms. So weirdly enough, writing all the stuff down and helping people see their stuff in black and white is helping them also converse. And it was the first time in December where I saw my mom in maybe 20 years talking to her family and calling them, oh my gosh, family, family, and insisting that we take picture after picture after picture, right? But it does so much damage. At the root of it, it is money, right? Because people feel used and abused, that they've been forced to do so, to be the ones to take care of everyone, and they feel very angry, they feel very betrayed, they feel very used, which is understandable. But beyond that, the root cause is also a history that is rooted in oppression that then created that dynamic. And then we also we can't heal money trauma without fully understanding how that dynamic has impacted us, how it has resulted in certain wounds, how it has changed our identities and the way that we see ourselves. Because a huge part of healing money trauma is also understanding how systemic oppression has impacted our nervous systems so that we can actually heal from that impact as well. And also figure out, how do we continue to live and move on in a world that is extremely racist, extremely sexist, extremely ableist, extremely, like, so many things, right? How do we continue to heal and move on and build generational wealth? And what does that look like? And what is what is our responsibility when we do build that generational wealth? So I am going to take a short pause. I'll respond to people's comments in the meantime, but I want you guys to just take 3 to 5 minutes. So I'm actually going to time it. Okay, so we'll do 3 to 5 minutes, probably like 4 minutes or in between, where I want you to think about a personal memory related to money from your childhood or family life. Can be a significant moment that shaped your views on money, right? Focus on the emotions tied to that memory. And then if you want, I want you to share in the chat section, how did this memory influence your current beliefs or behaviors around money? And how did this memory shape your family? So actually the first question should be, how did this moment shape your family? How did it shape your family dynamics? And then how did those family dynamics shape your current beliefs or behaviors around money? Actually did not look at how I wrote that. But anyway, I give you guys 3 or 4 minutes, get a piece of paper, reflect on that. Basically, this exercise is to help you start seeing how how your family dynamics have an impact on your current behavior around money, right? So I'm going to go into the chat and just say, hi, guys. So Dumi is saying, hi, will this be on YouTube? No, it will not. I may make it a podcast, a Money Magic podcast, in about 2 or 3 months, but it will be available up until the end of November. This replay will be available on the Wealthy Money Academy page, just like the first replay is available. So I'm going to keep all those replays up until the end of November 2024. Yeah, Jehudi, you say small T trauma is the worst. It is. Oh, no, wait. I'm looking at stuff from the 17th. Oh, wow, that's so interesting. I did not know that it did that. So, Loretta, you're saying your mother's story is partly mine. And Agnieszka, you say, wow, that's an amazing impact. Yes, I think so. So, yeah, you guys can feel free to type in what comes up for you around how the memories shaped your family dynamics and how it impacted your behaviors and your beliefs around money. So someone said, iPhone said, I will listen to the recorded sessions. My phone's audio sessions are not working properly. Probably my settings. Sorry, sad to miss the live session. No worries, sis. Totally understand. Okay. Okay, so in another minute, and feel free to share in the chat section, or if the memory that's coming up is something that you're starting to connect, because I also want you to look at this particular memory and try to see if you can see some of its root causes as we're going through the masterclass, that you can see, oh, this is how some events, some macro events, have had a huge impact in my family on a very micro level, right? Okay, I'm going to move on, but please do share. So One of the things that I want to also talk about, right, is our family money stories. So most of our family money stories do not just develop in a vacuum, right? So one of the things I'm going to share a story. Years ago, when I wanted to increase my income, I had this really, really deep belief come up out of the blue because we don't realize how certain things are a trauma without really going deep into the work, right? So one of the things I remember just sitting down one day and doing a lot of the inner work. And one of the things that came up for me was that I will never succeed. I will never be able to travel and I will never be able to build a business that makes $100,000 a year as I travel because I'm a Black woman and Black women do not do that. And that really, really shook me. And especially like as a Black South African woman, I remember writing that down in my journal. And that was a belief that came from deep, deep within me. And a huge part of that was I realized that it is also the way that money had been portrayed to me. And not as something that people in my community had, right? And that came easily, right? That it was easy to make money and that you could make money working less hours. What I had seen was that Black women work the hardest in the world, and we still under earn no matter what. And I had internalized that, right? So that was a money story. Not only that, but it had been a family money story. There were family money stories, and that was reinforced by family money stories. Growing up, my grandmother would say to us, we're cursed with money. We're just not lucky with money in my family. And I think I've shared before how I find it so interesting because my cousin's wife, who married into the family, actually said something so interesting that she thinks that my family is so lucky with money, that she sees us doing so many epic and interesting things, and that like we have careers outside of the norm, like artists. People just don't have your normal careers and they make a living from that and are able to live and buy property, etc. But we never saw it. At least I never saw it. And I remember having this conversation with her actually in July, I think it was. So it wasn't even that long where we had this conversation, she and I. And I said, I don't remember, like it took me so much inner work to really start to see that we are not cursed with money. But a lot of that was coming from what my grandmother had said, right? And probably a lot of her stuff was coming from other things. My grandmother was one of the first women in Mpumalanga to drive a car and to be able to do it herself. And because my grandfather passed away in the 60s, so she had no option. She had 5 children. She had to do it herself. But I think because she worked so hard, she never really saw money coming in droves. Also, the system that she was working under, and also she was a single woman, and all of those things, right? So I think she never really got to see, my maternal grandmother anyway, she never really got to see how amazing she was. And also because the society around her wasn't really feeding her those stories, right? They weren't looking and going, wow, you're a Black woman and you're driving and you're looking after 5 kids and you're making it work and all your kids are going to university or getting whatever the diploma, degree, etc. after matric or grade 12. She wasn't getting that acknowledgement, and it started to impact how she saw herself, right? And this is absolutely true if we look at how historical and cultural context, how where we are, where we live, what is being mirrored to us absolutely impacts us, right? So how historical and cultural backgrounds shape our narratives, especially in marginalized groups, is very, very important to examine and look at. So if we find ourselves in spaces where success doesn't look like us, right? It's not the gender that is being shared. It is not like, it doesn't represent us in any way, right? It's not the race, it's not the gender, it's not the sexual orientation. We can start to feel like maybe this is not for us. And in small ways, we don't realize how deeply traumatic that is, right? And how that starts to shape our stories. So it was very easy for me to take on the story of what it meant to earn more as a Black woman, and especially as a South African woman, because I wasn't seeing other people around me do that. But as soon as that story came up for me in my journaling, I literally, and it was so ick. It was such an ick story because I was like, how can I carry a story like this? I'm such a believer in Black girl magic and in just how amazing we are and how incredible we are, right? Like, I just believe that we can do everything and anything that we put our minds to. So it felt ick. And I remember it took me years to be able to even share that belief and say, I used to believe that because I used to feel so ashamed, right? That I even had a belief like that. But the truth is that that belief naturally actually comes up for even a lot of my clients. Like I have clients when I ask them to to think about their spirit of money and reflect on their spirit of money, a lot of what they see in terms of the spirit of money is often not someone that looks like them, right? It's not someone that when they think of successful somebodies, they don't think of people that look like them often, right? Because what we've been taught is that success looks a particular way, it's a particular race, and it's a particular gender. So one thing that I wanted to read, just a small snippet from page 52 of the book, right? So I think I explained this better in page 52. I say systemic oppression and systemic poverty are interlinked and often reinforce each other. Systemic oppression refers to the way in which systems and institutions such as the government and the education and financial systems maintain discrimination and inequality based on race, gender, class, and other social identities. This can lead to systemic poverty where individuals and communities often face ongoing obstacles or barriers to accessing resources and opportunities such as education, employment, and financial stability. So it is so, so important for us to also not just examine our limiting beliefs about money, but also if we are going to be examining our family money stories, to also examine the stories that we have imbibed, is that the right word? But like that we have taken on, so to speak, because of the environment in which we're in. So what I often say to people is sometimes it's not that you're failing and that you're not able to expand financially. It's that you have found yourself in an environment that is not conducive to your growth, right? So if you're in a corporate environment and you find yourself not expanding and not being able to get a promotion, and you know that deep down, a huge part of that is because of your gender, or because of your race, or because of your sexual orientation, or all three, or both, or whatever, then you need to change environments. There's nothing that you can do that will help that situation. So sometimes, yes, you can affirm to death, right? You can change the way you see yourself, but it doesn't necessarily mean that other people will change the way that they see you. But the beauty of the inner work, why we still do the inner work, is that when I change how I see myself, I stop trying to operate in environments that are not conducive to me. I start to change how I start to see that I deserve better, and I start going after better. I start to leave environments that do not serve me as a person, right? So that's why we do the inner work. We don't just go, oh, it's never going to change. What's the point? We go, okay, we see how these money stories are also being impacted and further impounded by the environment that I am in. So if I do the work, then I can see when I'm constantly going into the same toxic environment, and I can start to change how I behave and start to operate differently. And then I can start to choose better environments where I can thrive, where I can see myself differently. And the more I'm surrounded by people that can see my awesomeness, then the more likely I am to succeed, right? I was telling a client this morning that it's sometimes if an environment isn't conducive to you, I said to her, I was like, just keep repeating, if not this, then something else. If not this environment, then another environment. If not these people, then other people, right? And asking the universe for that. But I think a huge failing of some of the teachings around the law of attraction when they refuse to take into account systemic oppression is that they literally make it an individual failure. They make systemic oppression and systemic failures individual failures. And the danger when we don't do our own trauma work is that we believe the lies that we are being told, right? We start believing things like, oh, you're too emotional as a woman, that's why you're not succeeding, right? Or you're weak, the way that you see the world and the fact that you cry, your empathy, your compassion is what makes you broke. You need to be hardcore and strong. Or no, you have to work you need to wake up at 5 a.m. every day and sleep at 8 p.m. every day. That's why you're failing, because you are not allowed to see yourself as a full-bodied human being that has a womb, and to acknowledge that on your period, you're going to be a different person, right? To when you're ovulating. So you cannot follow those hardcore black and white instructions about how to achieve success. But what we do is we go, oh, the world is structured in this way. I need to force myself to fit into this world that is very much built with men in mind in terms of how we grow our generational wealth and how we build wealth, right? And so when we can't live up to those insane standards that really don't work for us, the days when we have that 1 week of PMS and then we have our period and then we're like, oh my God, 10 days have gone by. We then make ourselves wrong instead of asking ourselves, wait, how do I find an environment that basically loves who I am and supports how I operate, right? This is so, so important because our external environment absolutely shapes how we see ourselves and how we perceive success. It was I feel like one of the greatest things that I did, or luckily, it's pure luck, right? It's from doing the work as well, was that realization that I thought that the only way I was ever going to be able to make money was to literally work in a corporate environment and to try to change myself, right? To try to change myself on those days when I need to take days off on my period to power through PMS. And then when I couldn't do that, I would beat myself up. I feel like I am so lazy. Further, like cementing that story that I had about myself and money and the view of myself, not realizing that actually the environment that I'm in isn't really helping me thrive. They're not giving 3 days of period leave. They're not allowing me to take that time off to recuperate, which, by the way, Spain has now made a law that companies need to give 3 days of period leave to all women, right? So all of those things, we make ourselves wrong when really the system is what needs to change. And it holds us up for so long. So many of us are busy trying to change ourselves instead of working with who we truly are, embracing ourselves so that we can actually build the wealth that we want and actually create money in a way that is in alignment with us. A huge part of why we struggle in terms of making money, one of the first things I do with clients is really understanding what is your lifestyle like and tell me your day-to-day activities. And most women will come and say, I feel so lazy, I'm so burnt out, and I'm so tired. And then they'll go on to name everything that they do in a day. And just listening, you're like, oh, I'm so exhausted. Why? Because the system has told you that if you're a woman and you're a wife, you're a mother, you have to be superwoman, you have to do it all. And when you don't do it all, you guilt trip yourself, right? And that impacts your ability to show up. So you think that there's something wrong with you and you're lazy because you have no added energy to then show up to make money. So the real thing is, how do we then change that system in which you work in? How do we get you more support? How do you get more things off your plate so that you can actually focus on income generating activities? Do you see how that's completely different to the situation sucks, but I need to force myself regardless. I need to change myself and who I am and everything I believe in order for this to work, right? Completely different. So we need to take into account how historical and cultural impacts of systemic oppression impact us, right? So some things that you need to be aware of, right, is how colonization literally disrupted our indigenous economies, right? How slavery created economic disparities, right? And still inflicts deep financial wounds that persist till today. Colonization, same thing. Racism has actually had a huge impact on us. And I will be reading from a snippet. Let me see if I've still got that right. So one of the things that I found so interesting on page 46, some of the research that I did, right? One of the things that I learned was in essence, constantly dealing with stresses like racism and microaggressions, in other words, subtle racism or racist undertones, can overload the body, making it tough for the nervous system to handle these situations. This is called allostatic load and refers to how the body responds to stress. Sadly, the effects of colonization, apartheid, racism, and slavery have had a huge impact on the allostatic load of Black people, affecting their health, nervous system, and finances. So interestingly enough, research shows that constantly being in an environment where you're constantly experiencing racism or microaggression of any sort actually impacts how much stress you can handle at a physical level. Like, you are more likely to experience heart attacks, right? You're more likely to suffer from an autoimmune disease. You're more likely to struggle with anxiety attacks. So there is so much. And all of that, if you think about it, if you are now, your body is being impacted, your health is being impacted, that impacts your ability to make money. You are not as mobile if you have an autoimmune disease, right? Or disorder. You are going to be, you spend most of your time in hospital. Most of your money goes towards medical aid and the medical system. So now you actually have less money to spend on building generational wealth. So it has a huge impact on you. If you are struggling with anxiety every day because you are in a racist environment at work, or you're dealing with clients that make you second guess yourself, or where you have to over explain yourself, how you show up in those meetings literally impacts your self-esteem and your self-confidence, which impacts your ability to close sales, to create an extra stream of income, to even grow your income, right? So, and that's directly a result of the system in which you operate, right? It also impacts financial behaviors in Black families, right? So colonization and slavery have had such an impact on us, right? I've already spoken about that in terms of my maternal family, right? And I go into it more in depth in the book. You can check it out. And what it teaches us is how to focus more on survival than expansion. So one of the things that I was thinking about today was how I'm always in awe of how, when I connect with people, when I look at clients that come from a background where they grew up with wealth and abundance and never had to worry about money. When they come to me, their main focus isn't how can I save more? Their main focus is how can I expand? How can I have more? Why? Because they've been told that they can have more in the world and that it's safe to have more. And they know that having more means making more money means that they can save more and they can invest more. Whereas people that come from backgrounds where there wasn't a lot, their mindset is already wired towards survival. And what we often, I take a while to get them to get to the point where they can even think of more of expansion and investing and really building generational wealth at a bigger level, right? Why? Because when your entire world was about having less and just surviving, making it through the day, what you're taught is how do you manage the little that you have? So even now, a lot of a lot of our nervous system is wired to how do I manage whatever little I have? And so there's a lot of fear of running out and managing whatever little bit you have. And it's completely different to an expansion mindset, which is how do I make more? How do I take whatever little I have and invest it? And how do I then, and I found that people that think like that also have a higher risk tolerance. That's just my observation, that little bit, right? That's just me, right? But it's something that I've been very, very fascinated by. And I know I want to do another book on that, right? I want to explore that very much in depth and link it to some things that I've seen around trauma. And of course, all this, slavery and colonization has led to very distinct money archetypes. And a lot of those money archetypes as a result of helping us survive in this world. And in What's Your Money Personality, I've identified 10 archetypes, although the core archetypes are the 5 shadow archetypes. And then from there's the 5 golden archetypes. We'll be talking about those archetypes in upcoming classes. Right. So with all that and understanding how systemic oppression impacts us, we also need to understand how systemic oppression has also led to this wealth gap between marginalized communities and privileged groups. I've already just shared how there's a big difference in how when someone comes from privilege and they are thinking of building wealth, how they think about building wealth. It's completely different. I promise you guys, it is such a fascinating thing when I look at my clients and when I deal with clients from different backgrounds. It's like night and day. Most of us is still like, a lot of us, when we're coming from backgrounds where we didn't have privilege, we're still like, how do I get out of debt? How do I save this little bit? And freaking out about spending whatever little bit we have. And it becomes a whole rewiring about giving ourselves permission to spend, to get support, to hire the coaches, to hire the chefs, to hire the cleaning ladies, all of that, because we are working from survival. So really understanding how even your background in terms of where you come from, in terms of class system, has impacted your financial outlook on life and how you move through the world. And there's certain things that you will not know that the wealthy will have access to. So for example, what I'm always fascinated by is how a lot of my wealthy clients, because they're wealthy or because they come with trust funds, even if they haven't made their own money, they will have access to, when we start doing the work, instantly private bankers or wealth managers, right? And then from there, whatever they save, whatever they put into exchange traded funds or into shares, their wealth manager will literally tell them, you know, you can loan against that. You can actually use whatever assets you have, that ETF or those shares, and go to a bank and loan against that. A lot of my clients that come from those backgrounds and don't have access to that information don't know that, right? So a lot of us operate from just pure cash, right? We want to get debt free, and then we just become debt free, and then we work from whatever cash we have. Whereas what I see with my other clients is just like a whole different ballgame, and how that completely changes their outlook. And when they have all of those things, the wealth managers, the financial advisors, all of those people, the lawyers, etc., how easy it is for them to take whatever they have and grow it and up level it and make even more, right? Once they've started to heal their inner trauma and all that. It's always just such a fascinating thing. And of course, a lot of this also comes from the fact the wealth gap is also caused by historical barriers to education, employment, and obviously home ownership, right? So for a lot of us, we don't have this information, right? What I'm talking about, that, oh, if you have ETFs, you can go to the bank and loan against that. Or if you have shares, you can go to the bank and loan against that, right? And you'll have your private bankers or your wealth managers, more wealth managers than private bankers, helping you do all of those things, right? And that's because that's just not something that is given to just everybody. So understanding that when you're at a certain class system, it also comes with certain access to information and financial education, right? And that education then helps you accumulate wealth. So what has happened with us is because of, with a lot of Black people on a global level, or people of color on a global level, is that that information hasn't even filtered down to the majority of us, right? And so we have very little wealth accumulation, right? So, and because of that, you then experience less opportunities, because you don't know, hey, you know what? I don't have to sell off my ETFs. I can actually go to the bank and borrow against them, and then rather pay a loan back so that I can continue to have these investments, and that money can continue growing in my investments. A lot of us don't have that information, right? So what we end up doing is we invest, we sell off whatever we invest. We invest, we sell off whatever we invest. We don't understand that investments are an asset that can also give us access even to loans, right? And that basically delays us in how quickly we can accumulate wealth and build generational wealth through time. A lot of that directly linked to structural issues, right? That's a lack of education, lack of the fact that people didn't think to tell us that, to teach us some of those things. That's a class system issue. That's also very much an issue that, and that class system issue is deeply linked to colonization, to apartheid, to slavery, right? And it also then impacts our access to resources. Because every time we are investing, we're wondering, how is it that the wealthy can actually invest and keep investing and the investments grow? Well, because they move differently, right? And they do things differently. So now when we have access to, so what we do is we've been taught you invest and you sell off. And I know in South Africa, that's been a huge thing, right? Trying to re-educate people even in stokvels that, hey, not every December, you don't have to sell off whatever you've invested. But that's what we've been taught, right? So imagine if we were taught differently, even within the stokvel context, to say, hey, keep your investments, you can loan against that, so that next year you keep investing, you keep investing, you keep investing, and your investments grow, and you can take from that interest and that return on investment and pay off whatever debts you have from a business or whatever, right? So all this information, and it's almost like gatekeeping. All this information is basically being kept from us for many, many reasons. I've been in rooms where I've been told that, oh, people won't understand this. It's too above their heads, right? And that's not true, right? Just this is how the system seems to be designed. And what it does is it keeps perpetuating cycles of poverty, whereas others who have access to this information, have access to the resources, have access to the people that can make things happen, continue to grow their wealth. And this is a conversation that needs to be had. And I think that it's really, really important for us to understand this, that It's also about how the system works, and that there are also certain support systems that we need as we expand so that we can access certain resources. So, and I found this very, very interesting because in page 47, I talk about how the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap report in 2022 said that it will take another 132 years to close the global gender gap if we continue at the current rate. So guess who in all communities around the world has the least access to all this information around building wealth? Women, right? So, and a huge part of that also comes from the fact that for years, up until just like maybe 2, 3 decades ago, most women most women globally couldn't own their own homes, right? Couldn't have their own bank accounts, all sorts of things. And so now you're busy playing catch up. And all that playing catch up is really impacting our ability to build generational wealth. So understanding that certain things, this is why I get so upset about the law of attraction and all those things, because certain information will not reach you unless you go out to find it, unless you find people that are talking about that and can also help you understand that what you don't know, right? It's beyond just like law of attraction. So that being said, we need to understand the influence of oppression on family dynamics, right? And understand how oppression shapes our family relationships. It is super, super important. Understand also how when when your parents couldn't get access to certain things, how it shaped their ability to provide within the family, and how that then shaped them in the family, right? And shaped how they show up for you as a mother or as a father within the family, and how that then influenced you, right? And my favorite part of this is on page 44. So last week, if you watched part 1 of the class, I shared some of the research that Honey did around the broken telephone. If you don't know what the broken telephone is, please go watch part 1 of the class or read chapter 3 of the book. So one of the things that I say in page 44 of the book is the apartheid system contributed to a broken telephone system between us and our ancestors, which also has financial ramifications, since many of us cannot easily call on our ancestors to receive the knowledge and wisdom we need to succeed financially and emotionally. So a huge part of what oppression did, if you look at the apartheid system and you look at slavery literally took people off their land, right? Off the African continent, off their land, basically divorced people from what they know, so that even now, people are still trying to trace where they come from, still struggling to trace their roots all the way back so that they can make sense of who they are. And then you've got in South Africa, many people were displaced. So many of us can no longer trace back 7 beyond, maybe even 5 or 6 generations back, right? Whereas before, we would be able to trace all the way back. We would know exactly where our great grandfathers were buried, or great grandmothers were buried, and we would be able to call on them if we needed support. And that's a huge part of accessing ancestral wisdom. And we would also know who these people are, what makes them who they are, what unique qualities do they have, what are the core strengths that my bloodline carries, right? What is it that my bloodline can do that we just do in our sleep? That wisdom becomes very, very important because it helps you understand who you are. What are some of your natural strengths that you can tap into in order to build generational wealth? But because of forced removals, because of slavery, all of that, a lot of us have lost that connection. Another thing is that apartheid, as well as the system of slavery, actually was engineered to create the single parent household, right? So when we talk about the broken telephone system, is that most people don't know, some people don't know their father's lineage or their mother's lineage. So you're now dealing with just one lineage. And it's hard for you to trace back who your people are on the other side. So now you're literally you're working with a limp, right? Instead of having two sides supporting you spiritually, you're only having one side supporting you spiritually, right? And that, like I said in last week's masterclass, it has a huge impact on us. It has a huge impact in how we build generational wealth, on our financial success, on our ability to handle certain things emotionally, because you don't fully know yourself in that case, right? So this is a huge thing, and it's deeply linked to oppression. And for us as a people, most of us as Black people, we do carry that understanding that we do not walk alone. We walk with many people. And the idea is that if you can walk with that many people, you should be able to call on those people, right? And to ask those people to support you and to help you and to tap into wisdom. But now we've lost a lot of that ability, right? And it has a huge impact on us. Yeah. So I wanted to see, what is it that I wanted to say? Okay, now I don't have to read that from page 53. So one of the things that I want to, so basically the conclusion that I drew from that I want to draw from all that is I want to say families under oppression develop a survival mindset, right? They tend to prioritize immediate needs over long-term planning for many reasons. And I want to come back to that. So apart from the lack of access to resources, right? It's so interesting. The research that I found, so in page 52 to 53 of the book, it's going to be a little long of a read, but that's only because I think this is so important, right? It's that when we come from backgrounds where we've experienced scarcity, it actually impacts our brain. It impacts the makeup of our brain, believe it or not. So experiencing constantly going through life where we're worried about money, we don't have enough money, we grew up in households where there's never enough, has actually changed the way our brain makeup is, like the physical structure of our brain, according to research. But not only that, it also changes the way that we make decisions. So one of the things that I found so fascinating was a study that said, so in page 52, I'm going to read just a little bit from page 52 to 53. So a study by Natalie Haltz in 2015 found that poverty trauma can have a negative impact on children's brain development. This is because poverty is traumatic, is a traumatic experience, and the brain registers it as such, leading to different ways of processing information. So just take that in. Like, it literally, poverty and constant stress around money from a very young age as a child changes your brain development, right? They found that actually the white matter and gray matter in the brain is underdeveloped when you grow up in a household where you experience poverty or you're constantly worrying about money as a child. Just reflect on that. It's not even, oh, oh, it's a spiritual fact or it's emotional. No, it's very tangible. We can see it. We can see the brain matter, right? And then another study by Mweni Jazeni et al. In 2019 found that due to limited options and immediate needs, individuals in poverty may prioritize short-term needs over long-term planning. This can lead to decisions that result in more debt, fewer savings, and unhealthy habits. The study explains that the reason behind poor people's tendency to make short-term financial decisions is not because of an inherent character flaw, or intelligence, but rather because they often face significant financial stress and have limited resources to work with. The stress can make it difficult for them to focus on long-term goals and can impact their sense of personal power and self-worth. So actually, they found this also goes deeper at a nervous system level, than when you are in positions of intense and acute financial stress or poverty. You cannot make long-term financial decisions because your nervous system is fully in survival mode. So what you end up doing is just thinking for the short term. What we are taught, though, as a society is to shame people, poor people, when they make decisions that don't take into account long-term financial impact. We are taught to shame them and to make fun of them without really understanding how that situation has impacted them at a very nervous system level and made it almost impossible for them on an intellectual level and a nervous system level to prioritize long-term planning. So when most of us come from a background of experiencing intense financial stress and poverty, what we are most likely to do is prioritize short-term gains, even if suddenly we woke up and won the lottery. So if you're in South Africa, you know the show I Blew It. So if you're not South African, I Blew It is a show where it's a reality show where every week they feature someone who made lots of money in different ways, winning legal cases, winning the lottery, inheritance, anything. And they just blow that money within a short space of time. We're talking people getting multi-millions of dollars, right? And they can literally go from nothing in the bank to being millionaires, and then they end up blowing it. And it's always this thing that people laugh about. And I always say it's a nervous system problem. The nervous system cannot hold all that. But also, when you've experienced extreme scarcity, your nervous system is hardwired to now think more short-term than long-term, which is why when you get that amount of money, your first thing is to go get a Porsche or to buy, like we've seen most people do, buy everyone in their neighborhood a house, a car, etc. And we're like, why would you do that? Why not save that money? Well, a lot has now changed at a nervous system level, at a physical level, which is why we need to work on rewiring the nervous system, really working on healing our trauma. And some of that is ancestral, as we've just been talking about. I hope you've been getting the point that like all this colonization, slavery, all of that didn't start with you, right? It literally is a very ancestral thing that just continued from one generation to the next with lack of access to resources, with all sorts of things, which then created a cycle of poverty. But now it's up to us to change that. And the first step is always working with the nervous system, right? So what I want you guys to remember is that children raised in oppressive environments often lack essential financial literacy skills, impacting their future stability, which I find very, very interesting that in our education system, and I'm just gonna go there. In our education system, we expect that children will go from these extremely intense environments of struggle and dealing with oppression to somehow getting up, getting a degree, and then suddenly being able to work with finances and being able to build generational wealth when that information isn't always readily available. And when we've just spoken about how those environments have literally impacted their allostatic load, how those environments have impacted their prefrontal cortex, their gray matter, their white matter, their brain, right? How it's impacted their nervous systems. And we're like, oh no, it's just that you're not disciplined enough. You're not doing enough. And we also do that to ourselves. Do you see how that is not being compassionate towards ourselves? Because we don't understand how all of those things have impacted us. And we just expect that we will be just fine. And everybody's allostatic load is different, by the way. So the psychological effects of oppression are that we can internalize our own oppression, right? So the story that I shared earlier about how I believe that I could not make money and travel and build a business and do the things that I wanted because I was a Black woman, that is also a way, yes, the society was showing me something and reflecting something back to me, but I was also internalizing my oppression. And some of us don't understand that, right? That we feel, we think that we are wrong for some reason and we're doing something wrong, whereas the issue is the system, right? And then we also engage in certain, to be able to deal with everything that we're experiencing. Our nervous system then gets wired to go straight into survival mode. And our nervous system struggles to process a lot of this trauma. So we then adopt unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? We start spending on alcohol, on drugs, on clothes, we just overspend and we're not realizing why we're doing that, right? Which is why it's so important for us to address all of these effects, address not just the psychological, but also address whatever is happening at a very nervous system level and also at an ancestral level. This is why I love the work that I do, because it is also critical to call in our ancestors to help them heal, because we're carrying their stuff. So being able to heal in a holistic manner, it's not just, I mean, as you can imagine, the research is showing that we are being impacted at a physical level, but most of us just want to do the inner work from a very psychological and mental level. We just want to do the affirmations. And I'm like, but you're working with the mental. What about the physical stuff? What about the nervous system, right? And most of us don't even want to talk about the ancestral plane, let alone the physical stuff, because that's what we've been taught, that you cannot talk about that. Except, again, it did not start with us. So you guys can read page 61 on there. So one of the things that I talk about in page 61 is District 6 and the Tulsa, District 6 in 1966 in South Africa, and the Tulsa race riots in 1921, and how that has literally changed us and impacted us as people. And I share how when I started doing this work and was doing Tantra yoga, I started doing a lot of work around womb trauma, where I was taking myself through all of that. I started actually just doing Tantra yoga, and my ancestors thought that it was a great opportunity to drop in and channel a lot of the meditations to me, but that's another story, right? But what I started to realize was how much fear I carried as a woman in my womb, right? Because the world didn't feel safe. And a lot of that, again, is systemic. When you look at violence against women, how does it change how we relate with our own bodies, how we relate with ourselves, how safe it feels for us to make money and be single or alone in this world, right? Because deep down, we know that you're not always safe. So it has a huge impact on us. And that sense of unsafety starts to impact the way that we show up in the world and show up financially and deal with money. Okay, so I'm not going to go too in depth on this because, yeah, we're already over time. So if you want to learn more about healing parental wounds, a huge part of ancestral trauma and also how systemic trauma impacts us is the way that it impacts how we show up in our families, as I've said in the beginning, right? It impacts how we show up as mothers, which is the mother wound, right? You can read more about what the mother wound is on page 59. And you can also see how to heal the mother wound in page 63. And it also impacts, again, a huge part of what we're talking about around slavery and forced removals and migration and apartheid is how it created a system of absent fathers. And this was created on purpose, right? And now that impacts us in the way of the father wound, right? In page 64 of the book, go read that. I talk about what the father wound is and how it manifests in our financial decision making. How will it show up, right? And then you can also look at you can also learn how to heal the father wound in the book. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through that. So I'm going to talk quickly about our money archetypes, right? 5 seconds, I'm going to switch on the light. Okay, there. So now that we understand how oppression and systemic oppression impacts family dynamics, we then have to understand how we then created money archetypes or developed money archetypes within our families in order to deal with our dysfunctional family dynamics around money, right? So what I will say is that family dynamics impact us a lot when it comes to shaping money archetypes and our attitudes around wealth, which we've already talked a little bit about. Cultural factors, right? Cultural impact also impacts how money is perceived and managed in different communities. For example, Black tax is one way in which it can be very, very cultural. I've seen it. I mean, Black tax is something that I've also observed in Asia. So it's not just unique to the African continent. I've also seen it within Asian communities, right? But we have a name for it and we call it Black tax, right? And how that then impacts our family dynamics and how it also impacts and all that, our culture and the way that culture impacts our financial behavior, the way that our families impact our money archetypes, also impacts our self-image, right? It's how we perceive ourselves. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be just dealing with each money archetype individually, and we'll be talking more in depth about that, how each money archetype perceives itself and how that self-perception then impacts financial behavior, right? So if you don't know what an archetype is, I am going to read from page 68 because I think that is the best description that I came up with. Let me see. Usually I'm like, oh, this is an archetype, but like I love it when I just read directly from the book. So page 68, I write that archetypes are universal symbols that exist in our collective consciousness and unconscious. They are often reflected or embodied in our stories and characters. The mother, for example, is an archetype. If you mention the term mother anywhere in the world, people tend to have the same image of the mother as nurturing, compassionate, sweet, and loving. Money archetypes are much the same, universal themes relating to money, wealth, and finances. Think of the spendthrift or the spender, the saver, all those are money archetypes, right? So when we are looking at our money stories, once we've started healing our nervous systems at a deeper level, once we've gone deeper on understanding our ancestral trauma and how systemic oppression has impacted us, it becomes very, very crucial to understand our money archetypes, right? So recognizing what your money archetype is, if you don't know what that is all in the book, right? And then looking at how we adapted, how that archetype came to be because of our family dynamics. What is it that shaped our archetype? So most of us are walking around thinking, I am just so sweet and I am an overgiver and I'm a giver and that's who I am. Well, that is also a story and an identity that was probably shaped by your family dynamics. And whilst it may help you in certain instances, it may also be hindering you in other instances, especially where money is concerned. You may be overgiving and giving too much, and you may not be able to set boundaries and may be struggling with giving to yourself first and even pricing because you don't want to appear selfish. So understanding how you adapted to trauma within your family will help you understand your money archetype. And once you start to understand your money archetype, you will then be able to start changing your narrative around money, your money story, and start building a new relationship with money, a different relationship with money, a healthier relationship, right? So this is why it's definitely important for us to understand our money archetype so that we can know when we are operating from our shadow archetype, money archetype, and our golden archetype, right? So I'm going to quickly just give you the description of what the shadow archetype is. I think that was in page 69, is it? No. So let me just see. I think I'm actually just going to read what I wrote at the back. Sometimes when I try to explain it without reading it and it's not written down, it's always such a, I feel like I take so long to explain it, right? So shadow archetype is the hidden and unconscious part of a person's personality that includes traits and emotions that they may not want to acknowledge or show to others because they've been deemed undesirable and shameful. The golden archetype is a person who has acknowledged, embraced, and integrated their harmful or destructive qualities and traits, and is now self-aware and is experiencing continuous personal growth, maturity, and expansion in various areas of their lives. This is to say, before we move into archetypes over the next few weeks, there is no like, yes, I'm going to always operate from the golden archetype. No, because sometimes we'll be so triggered, we will go straight back into our shadow archetypes, no matter how much we have healed, right? And there's still more work to do. The shadow archetype will show us, wait, this is more stuff this is my other type of behavior that I haven't been willing to acknowledge. And once we start to acknowledge that, love it, embrace it, we start to step into our golden archetype. And that's when we start to create wealth and build and money and make more money from such a healthier space, right? Whew, that being said, I'm going to read you guys' comments. I see them coming in. But before I stop the screen sharing, I wanted to say this is the book. So where I've been reading all the pages, etc., that I've been referencing. This is the book. It's called What's Your Money Personality? You can buy the book on Take-A-Lot, Amazon, or all major bookstores and e-book stores internationally, right? It's got some really incredible exercises. So you can also go to wealthy-money.com/money personality to learn more about how to get the book internationally, or you can just get it on Amazon, right? It's available on Google Books as well. It's available on Kindle. It's available on Boko, various ebook platforms. If you're in South Africa, I really recommend buying the book at the Book Circle Capital at bookcapital.co.za. That's with Suella. She delivers very fast. So just send her an email. Like literally, I've sent the book to people where I've sent people to her to buy, and they've messaged me and said, I got the book in 24 hours, right? So if you're watching this and you're like, wow, actually, I want more support in my life, I want to do one-on-one coaching, definitely reach out. I've got one spot left for one-on-one coaching. I charge $10,000 to coach with me for 4 months, but in that 4 months, we do 2 hours of coaching every other week. And we talk on a daily basis via WhatsApp. And I do meditations with you. Sometimes I record meditations just for you. And I give you homework in the form of other meditations, journal prompts. So we are always in constant communication, which is where a lot of the shifts come from. I'm laughing because this morning, one of my clients was saying to me, oh my gosh, I have to book an extra coaching session over and above my current coaching package. And I was like, no, you don't. Can we just finish this coaching package first? Because she's finding it so valuable and she can see the shifts. So this feels like, wow, you want to go deeper around healing ancestral trauma and you've read the book and you know and you know that there's so much work that you want to work on. Let's have a conversation. Reach out to me, email me. I definitely have a spot. I'll have a spot, one more spot open again. If this one fills up, the only time that I'll have a spot open is in 2025. So I'm going to stop the sharing and read everybody's chats. Please share any questions, share any aha moments, etc. Right? Let me see. Whew, that's a lot of comments. So D, you said, my dad never freely gave my mom money to shop or gifts or really talk about how much he was making. It made me afraid to ask or receive money from my romantic partners because I worried I'd be a burden. I can see that. I can truly, truly understand that, right? And Boo Boo, you say, my mom takes care of everyone as well. And for a long time, I didn't want to be successful. Yeah, so it's also a way of protecting yourself, right, Boo Boo? Because if you don't have any money and you're not successful, then you don't have to take care of others. Nobody can ask you for anything because you can always just say, listen, I don't have. And that would be the truth. Sharon, you say, as recent as last night, I got very angry about constantly helping out and worried that no one will be taking care of me. Sometimes, and that's a big, big thing, right? Sometimes if you are the one that is always helping everybody, how do you put a system in place so that when you need help, help is there, right? And sometimes what most of us learned is that if I don't ask and I always give, then people will love me, right? That it's when people ask, we saw parents that when they were asked, they would lose it, right? And get really, really upset. So Sharon, you say, grew up dirt poor, and we always had other homeless people or children that lived with us, and we shared space and food with them. Money does not come easy, and you have to work all the time. Yeah, I mean, that's a belief that will really stem from that experience because what your inner child saw is that it was hard to make money. So now every time you think of making money, that's basically the files that your subconscious is tapping into, and that your nervous system is literally just still trying to process. So it keeps going there because it hasn't processed the challenge and how difficult it is to make money. I think one of the things that we don't talk about is the trauma of making money through difficulty, how hard it is to make money through struggles, and how that can sometimes be deeply traumatic, or watching parents who made money through deep, deep struggles and hard work, and how we now carry some of that vicarious trauma, right? And how that has impacted our beliefs around making money, but also how it feels because of the vows of loyalty that we carry towards our families, how it feels deeply wrong, or like a sense of betrayal, to make money with ease, or to out-earn our families, or to make more than our parents ever made without going through the struggle. So D, say, it's made me want to go out there and fend for myself instead of having to ask someone else to assist me. I used to save some of my transport during my high school years because there was never enough money. I got to a point where I couldn't ask for assistance. I know I have a lot of healing that I have to do, more especially when it comes to how I see men. I think it's also affecting my dating life. I don't see a point of having a guy because I can do anything I want for myself, be it money-wise or having to move furniture around. Oh my gosh. There's so much around there, but all I will say is that that's a vow of service, and that's deep, right? The vow of service, and probably also a vow of rebellion. So it's not always just the vow of loyalty that keeps us stuck. It's also the vow of rebellion, never to have to experience what our families experience. But in so doing, we also curb ourselves. But that is also, we also curb ourselves from taking on some good behaviors or some good financial habits, right? Especially if we saw asking for help as a weakness, or every time a family member asked for help, they would be used or shamed or manipulated, or someone would go on a power trip because one person had more than the other. It really impacts us. So there's healing to be done there. But I also want to say that is a deep, deep God wound, deep. So it's great, guys, that we are able to work by ourselves and manifest, and we don't need anyone. But the truth is, when we have made this vow that we don't need support, we don't need anyone, it also impacts us asking for support even in our businesses, building a team, like getting people that we want in our lives, having financial advisors, all these other things. We then don't seek help, period, right? The problem with that when it comes to wealth creation is that we don't know what we don't know. We don't know everything, right? So we don't know where we need help, where we need to change our thinking habits, right? Who we need to hire on our team, right? I cannot tell you how often, like so many of my clients will tell you that by the time they're done coaching with me, they've hired an extra 3 or 4 people in their businesses or just their lives. Because a huge part of the work is really recognizing where you need help. But a lot of trauma is survival, right? It's protecting ourselves. So we don't even know where we need help. We don't even know the kind of help we need. So we're just working and thinking that we can do it all ourselves. But I promise you, for us to expand and grow, we need support. It's just a fact. It's very rare that someone makes it on their own. We keep hearing about the man who is self-made, made it on his own. Some of those men, when you listen to them, oh, there was a mother in the mix. There was a wife that was cooking his food, ironing his clothes. There were friends here that helped him in this way, all of that. We don't do it alone, right? So Tembagazi, you say my parents both passed away when they were very young. My mom only 3, my parents. Okay, got it. It's very traumatic how they grew up. Everything about it is emotional. The older one, my aunt, ended up having to study first, then help her siblings. My mom sacrificed school to go find work and had a big impact on raising us. So this is all coming up, bringing up so much. I was raised by the older sibling. The second one took me to tertiary and took care of finances, and then my mom. This complicates who I am, and I think I've taken from all 3 different ways of handling money. You really have, right? You really, really have, Tembagazi. You've taken on all their stuff. And the beautiful thing is you are in the Money Magic course. So lesson 20, vows of loyalty, vows of rebellion, those meditations are going to come in so handy. They're going to help you rewire your nervous system and just start to heal a lot of that. I'm sending you such deep hugs. That is a very, very challenging trauma because you're dealing with siblings that have been parentified, right? And also, I can't imagine the vows of loyalty that come towards the sibling that was parentified and towards a mother that gave up everything for everyone else, right? So, Pilisa, you say we didn't have much money growing up. When rich extended family members came to visit, we cleared up every corner of the house, and my mom would borrow money for cake or meat to entertain them. It felt like we never had enough money. And oh man, I want to do a live. I'll probably do it tomorrow around ancestral silence, like how we inherit these silences around money in our money story, so that we always have to hide our money situation from the other relatives, from everyone around us, and how that even shapes family dynamics, right? You're not allowed to talk about the struggle in case other people can use it against you, and how that impacts our vow of invisibility in this world, how we show up in terms of visibility, and how that then impacts us in our adulthood with these vows of invisibility where we have learned to hide, how it impacts our ability to make money and grow our income, right? Which inevitably impacts our generational wealth, our ability to build generational wealth. So Tembagazi, you say this makes me cry to watch my mom have so little and so powerless. It is so unfair. So Tembagazi, that is definitely a God wound and a vow of loyalty. That's why it feels so, so painful, right? Because your vow of loyalty, because your inner child is still deeply loyal to your mother. You're carrying her pain. So a huge part of the vow of loyalty is not that we don't want to be compassionate and we don't want to have empathy. Not at all, guys. We want to have compassion. We want to have empathy. But what we do not want, what it doesn't serve our mothers or our fathers to do, is for us to carry their pain. In essence, our mothers and our fathers carried this pain, gave up everything so that we could do better and be better. But the way that life works and the way that vows of loyalty work, out of love, we became loyal to our parents, but we didn't just become loyal to their expansion and their hard work and all of that. We also became loyal to the pain that they carried. We co-regulated to that, and we still carry it with us, which is why it's so triggering when we talk about it, we speak about it, we go right back there. We are still reliving it. So the parts of us that were there are still deeply in pain, and they're still reliving it, which is why we want to do the vows of loyalty work, vows of rebellion work, all this work around vows to start to heal those parts of us so that they can put down the pain, right? So that they don't have to feel like, oh, when I make money, oh, my mother never made this kind of money, and feel like they have to carry that pain for their mother, for your mother, or feel like they have to carry that pain for your father or your grandmother. That it's just like, wow, can we celebrate the expansion without those parts of us sabotaging us, because it feels like we are betraying the pain of the people that brought us up, or we're making it easy that, oh, I get to live a life where I get to sleep in until 10 a.m. on days when I want. So I must be making it easy for myself. No, so it must, like, it's almost like I'm betraying my mother for waking up at 4 a.m. every day and working super hard. It means that I don't appreciate, right? There's so much of that. So when you're dealing with vows, how you know you're dealing with a vow, you'll often be struggling with emotions of guilt around money. And again, I will explain that vows are not something that I really teach on, and I'll never do a free meditation or on a vow. Any of my clients will tell you that's because vows are very, very tricky. The work that we do on vows is very much at a physical level, but also on a spiritual plane, right? So we start to release vows definitely on a spiritual plane, on a soul level, in the Akashic plane as well, but we also release them on a physical level. Agnieszka, you say these slides and your wisdom is impeccable. Thank you. You said you have a hard stop. That's fine. If anyone needs to be let in at the top of the hour, if this is beyond the hour, please co-host to help Vangile out. Thank you, Agnieszka. And Lirata, you say, agreed, check the rise of autism, ADHD, ADD in the Black community. I agree that it changes our brain structure. Definitely. Busisiwe, you say you were just about to mention that show. Yeah, I blew it, right? Pilisa, you say caring fear. I can totally relate to that as a risk taker, artist without a trust fund. Oh, yes, Pilisa, definitely. And then Sharon, you say, thank you for your very insightful thoughts. It's scary, the unconscious patterns that influence your wealth creation. Yes, and D, you're saying too true. I know of who I always need to ask for assistance, but whenever I do, they are either busy or they don't respond. I end up telling myself that I got this. At times, I wonder if all that is happening is because of history repeating itself, not getting assistance right there and then, or I'm overthinking things when I need to get help. Maybe I'm impatient. It's not either or, D. It is a combination of everything, right? So your past has impacted the God wound that you carry. It impacts the vow of service. It impacts your vows of rebellion. You create vows. We all do. We all create vows in an effort to protect ourselves, right? So that we don't get hurt in the same way that we did as little kids. Okay, wow, guys. I love these classes. I really love the work that I do. As you can see, I'm sure I absolutely love this work. So again, this is the book. Check it out. Take a lot. Book Circle, Capital, Amazon, What's Your Money Personality? I mean, in the classes, I'm obviously going more in depth and I'm sharing with all of you. Thank you, Livu. And anyone that wants to take up that one-on-one coaching spot, hit me up. I'm going to start actively advertising it. But of course, I've mentioned the Money Magic course on here. If you also want to learn more about the Money Magic course, get on a call, do a discovery call with me, hit me up, let's have a conversation. This work is vast, it's broad. This book is 379 pages. Oh no, I lie actually. It's about 340 something, 350, still good. 350 pages. And it is still like not even enough. All my clients can tell you that it's not even 20% of the work that I do and I teach them, right? It's like not even. I could never fit that body of work into a single masterclass, into a book. It will take a while to do that. But yeah, the recording will be available shortly. I'm going to upload it in a second. So thank you so much, guys. Have a fantastic evening wherever you are in the world, or a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Cheerio!